Hello, my name is 𝐒𝐨𝐴 Grandmaster from Bulgaria. Today we are starting a new series on the greatest chess minds, and I would like to present you one of the most famous Serbian players ever. His name is Svetozar Gligorić, the legendary Serbian Grandmaster who was born on the 2nd of February 1923. He passed away some months ago, and until his very last moment, he was very productive, and he even, if I recall correctly, he even made a rap album. He produced a rap album at the age of almost 90. Of course, we are more interested in what he did in chess, and he was one of the best players back in the 1950s and 1960s. His games are very interesting, and everyone who wants to improve his style and wants to play crystal clear style, to put it this way, should be looking at his games. They're always very fundamental. The strategy is based, is a good fundament of the tactics, and in the end, usually he is producing nice tactical strikes. So just a couple of things to know about him. He became an orphan when he was very young, but then he learned to play chess, and he was 9 years old when his father died. But later he learned how to play chess, and he stayed outside the cafe and watching all the time the people playing chess. When he broke his arm, he was 13 years old, and he had to spend more time at home, and he started playing chess more regularly. Then came the war, and he lost 4 of his most beautiful years. He was fighting against the Nazis. But anyways, when he returned, his career was still great. He managed to win 11 Yugoslavian championships. He was probably the second or the third best player of the West back in the 1950s, 1960s, sometimes even the best player. If we exclude the USSR players, he was one of the very few people who could compete with them on equal terms. He beat world champions, he beat Botvinnik, Petrosyan, literally everyone of that time. So today what I want to show you is a game which Robert James Fischer, who was also beaten by Gligorić, by the way, said once is very typical for Gligorić style. Gligorić is playing with the white pieces. His opponent is the Romanian player 𝐒𝐮. The tournament is Büsum 1969. Gligorić goes for the move d4. He was playing both e4 and d4 throughout his career, and we have Queen's Gambit accepted. Knight f3, knight f6, e3 was played, bishop g4, and the most straightforward and obvious move is bishop takes c4. By the way, now white is creating already a threat. If you want to, you can try to find it. Say if black does a move like a6 in this situation, just a nothing move. You can try to find the threat. It's not that difficult. This is the move bishop takes f7, and after king takes f7, there is knight e5 check, forking the bishop on g4. So bishop takes f7 in this situation is a strong threat. Also queen b3 is a threat in this situation. Black is more or less forced to play the move e6, h3, bishop to h5, and white calmly developed his pieces with the move knight to c3. Gligorić states that the early development of the bishop would be justified in case of the move queen b3, and indeed this is so because black is going to take on f3, and after g takes f3 he is not going to start defending passively the pawn on b7 or advancing it. This will weaken all the light squares in the opponent's camp, but instead of that he is going to play knight d7, sacrifice that pawn, and make use of the better development and the weaknesses in the opponent's camp by opening the game with the move c5, with strong initiative for the sacrificed pawn. Naturally, this wasn't something that white was wishing to see, and in the game he chose another approach. He simply developed the knight on c3 instead. Knight c3, 97, and I will suggest that you pause your videos and try to find the following plan by white. What to do next? If you need more time, you can pause your videos. The natural looking move e4, which is grabbing center, is in fact inaccuracy in this situation because black is going to take on f3, and after queen takes f3, he has the move knight b6 with double attack against the bishop and the pawn on d4. This will force white to play a move like queen d3, and then black can reduce the pressure by trading on c4. With two white pieces less, it's much easier for black to defend. He can after that organize the move c5, or he can also play c6, and it's going to be a completely different story compared to what happened in the game. So instead of that, in the game he chose the move bishop on e2. Now the knight is defended and the e4 move is coming next. Black chose to play bishop to g6. He is temporarily stopping the advance e4, and later Gligovic suggested a better defense for the second player, and this is the move bishop d6. We'll have a look at this in a moment. We'll come back to this position at the end of the game, but before that I want to show you what happened in this one. So bishop g6 was played. White castled, and after bishop e7, Gligovic proves that the move bishop g6 is not a great idea here by jumping with the knight on h4. He's attacking the bishop on g6. The bishop has nowhere to go, and after castling, not only that white is winning the bishop pair, but after e4, he still achieves the desired advance of the central pawns. Now these beautiful central pawns are controlling the center, and they are very well supported by the bishops. So black is already in a difficult situation. He played c6. That's a passive tactic, and of course it doesn't promise too much. But on the other hand, if he plays c5, then very unpleasant for him is going to be e5. The knight does not really have too many squares where to go. h7 and e8 squares are too passive. Knight d5 can be answered simply with knight takes, pawn takes, and now either bishop f3, bishop e3. By the way, taking on d5 here is not the only idea. Knight e4 is also interesting, although I suspect that Gligovic would have taken on d5 and then continued with a move like bishop e3. Okay, but black played the passive move c6. Now, as you can see, his pawns are very well placed on the light squares. He is lacking the light squared bishop, but on the other hand, there is not a single active opportunity for him. He cannot really advance the pawns on either flank. He needs to stay and wait for white to come and get him. That's the main problem with this position, and I think that white is going to come and get him because that pawn on g6 is a hook for the white pawn to come on h5 and to open the g file in a good moment. So this is one plan for white. He can play h4 and h5 in a good moment, and then g3, king g2, and start attacking on the h file. Or the other thing is to prepare some central play the way that he did it in the game. Bishop e3. White is not in a hurry, and he is improving his position slowly but surely. a5. There isn't much else that black can do, indeed. Rook c1, queen b8, e3, rook d8. Black is doing everything that he could. But somehow the active moves are over, and now he just needs to wait and see what's going on. While white is bringing the last sleeping piece, this is the rook on d1, and this is the moment in which black played b5. He is losing his patience. He's trying to grab some space on the queen's flank, but the moment isn't chosen right. Actually, advancing the pawns, like I told you at the beginning, is not a good idea for black at all. So how are you going to try and punish him at the moment? If you need more time, you can pause your videos. The way that Gligovic did it was to play the move e5. The idea is that the natural knight e5 now can be answered knight takes d5, and black doesn't really have a choice. He needs to take with the pawn from e6, because if he takes in this direction, he is losing the pawn on b5. And two bishops together with an extra pawn, that's going to be an easy win for the first player. If he takes on e6, with the e6 pawn though, there is another unpleasant thing coming. This is the move bishop g4. The knight needs to be defended somehow. It doesn't really matter how black is defending the knight. If it is queen b7 or rook d8, white's answer is going to be always the same. Actually, rook d8, that was this pawn kinging. Let's say queen b7, the answer would be e6. And black's pawn chain on the king's flank is completely destroyed. With it, the king is going to suffer painful checkmate. So after the move e5, the knight has to go to a very passive square, knight e8. Knight is coming now on e4. Thank you for the good square. All the white pieces are now in the center, as you can see it. And next, he is going to attack on the king's side, thanks to the centralized army. Once again, it is your turn. Try to find a perspective plan to attack on the king's side. The way that Gligoris did it was to play bishop g5. He's trying to trade the best defender of the black's position. If black trades himself on g5, then the knight is coming on g5, followed by queen e4, queen h4, queen h7, and some checkmates. Nasty checkmate is coming. So taking on g5 or trading this bishop is not only weakening the d6 and c5 squares, but it is weakening the king. And black needed to keep this bishop. He played bishop f8. The next phase is to advance the h-pawn. And like we mentioned before, the double pawn on g6 is that hook which is allowing white to open the h-file and to finish the opponent's king. Very consistent play by the first player. Knight d5 and queen d3. This time white is using the advantage of the space that he is having to transfer the queen to a more active position from where it will attack the king. There was of course another way. It was possible to play g3, king g2 and rook h1, but naturally bringing the queen is more powerful and dangerous for the black king. Queen b7, queen h3, queen d7 and h5. And it's time to have a look at the position. Black is completely helpless. With natural and slow moves, white managed to convert his advantage, his positional advantage, his strong center, two bishops and extra space into decisive attack. And this is why Fischer called this game very typical for Gligoris. Black has to take on h5, bishop takes h5, queen is coming on e7. Two more moves and black is resigning, and these two moves were bishop g4 first. You will see why exactly on this square. And after c5, white went bishop d2. The last two moves retreated the bishops, but at the same time white has freed the g5 square for the knight. The threat knight g5 followed by queen to h7 checkmate can be stopped only with the move bishop e7, but this is where we see is the key behind white's move bishop to g4. He can grab the pawn on e4, and that's it. Therefore, black resigned in the situation. Now let's go back on move number 8. The way that white won this game was so easy that one would think that probably no one is going to repeat the opening again, but it was Milan Matulovic who repeated it even twice against Gligoris, and he was following his own recommendation in this situation. Gligoris said that it didn't make any sense for black to move back the bishop and to try to prevent the move e4, because you saw during the game knight h4 and knight g6 is coming and e4 is coming anyways, but instead of that, black needed to prevent it with the move bishop d6, or if he cannot prevent the move e4, at least to prepare the counter strike e5 in this situation. Gligory's recommendation was to follow castle, and if e4 now, to play e5. But in their encounter in 1976 in Novi Sad, instead of that, Gligory played e4 immediately. Now the game continued in a very interesting way. Black plays bishop b4, so he's attacking the pawn on e4 at the moment. That's also Gligory's recommendation. And after e5, knight d5, and queen b3, white is having more space and better center, which was one of the things that Gligory loved to do himself. But black has some counterplay based on the move c5. White castled. Bishop takes c3 was played, b takes c3, queen b6, and bishop d2. Calm development, but that's the beginning of a very concrete play. Gligory is sacrificing a pawn. In return, though, he is going to try and to keep this king in the center. Matulvish took on d4, c takes d4, c takes d4. Then he went for it. He took the pawn on d4, and now he has an extra pawn, but Gligory has a pair of powerful bishops, and he has foreseen this already when he was sacrificing the pawn. The next move is very strong, so you can pause your videos and try to find it for yourselves. The move that I'm talking about is rook ad1. Ambush. The idea is to move away this bishop in a good moment, and also sometimes white is threatening to take on d5 and to grab the pawn on d5 at the end. Now, if black castles, which looks like the less evil, white is going to take on d5. And after queen takes d5, the key move is to go bishop b4. This double attack against the queen and the rook. Black is more or less forced to trade queens. And now the exchange is lost. He's temporarily having two pawns for the exchange, but the problem with the position is that after f4, the rook manages to penetrate along the 7th rank, and white's chances for win are very high. I think that this is more win than a draw in this situation. What happened in the game, though, was that black didn't castle. He played queen b6. Then bishop takes d5 was very strong. And after he takes d5, white played, of course not queen takes d5, as then black can try to defend. Maybe he can even consider castling long. But anyway, he is going to castle after say queen e6. Instead of that, bishop b4 was played, and this king had to stay in the center. White has large advantage, and he managed to convert it after the moves a5. Queen takes d5. Now that pawn had nowhere to go. Queen c6, bishop d6. Even in the endgame, black is suffering from this powerful bishop on d6. After knight b6 and rook b5, black is losing the pawn on b7. Okay, at least black managed to trade the bishop on d6, but this naturally wasn't something that he has to be very proud of. After knight d6, pawn takes on d6 and castles. White has the move rook c1. Then he is bringing his rooks on the 7th rank with a technically winning position, which he managed to convert after rook takes d6, rook takes f7, rook g6, and the subtle move a4 block the pawn on a5, thus preventing any counterplay by the black pawn coming on e3 and attack against the pawn on a2. So later on, Gligory managed to convert the advantage. You can have a look at the game. A very nice one too. Little by little, he forced the black rook to defend the pawn on a5. He traded a pair of rooks, forced passive defense, advanced his pawns on the king side, and a typical Rubinstein style, he converted the advantage. So this was the introductory video about Svetozar Gligory. You're going to see some more fabulous chess in the next videos. Thank you for your attention and see you soon.